Welcome to the Korea Pro Podcast, your weekly guide to understanding the most pressing and complicated developments shaping South Korea. We're your hosts, Jeongmin Kim,
John Lei,
and Joon Ha Park of Korea Pro.
Go beyond headlines as we explain not just what happened, but also what really matters and why it matters.
If you monitor South Korea for work or just trying to keep up, you're in the right place.
This is the Korea Pro Podcast.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the Korea Pro Podcast. It is now Thursday, December 18th. We're recording this a little bit before 3 p.m. We have a lot of things that happened in South Korea this week. For instance, the martial law probe has finally concluded, and we'll be talking about that along with some other economic news headlines that have impacted South Korea. So, Joon Ha, you've been covering and you've been observing everything that's been going on with the martial law related cases. So could you walk us through it, please?
Right. So they finished their probe on December 14th. That was after the extension that was happening in November when President Yoon extended following National Assembly approval. So the special prosecutors, they alleged that Yoon and his inner circle, which included the former defense minister Kim Yong-hyun and former counterintelligence commander Yeo In-hyung, they were pursuing a broader plan to use the military to neutralize political opponents, suspend constitutional institutions, and consolidate power, which was what the special prosecutors said, which they compared to the country's military-backed authoritarian rule in the 1980s. So basically, the investigation, they found that preparations for martial law on Yoon's end began as early as October 2023. Yoon was continuously alluding to using emergency national powers to suppress the National Assembly from election in 2022, but he sort of consolidated the period of where he wanted to actually move forward with the martial law plan in October 2023.
Just a charming guy all around.
And if you look at that, what are the, investigation itself is over, but then there are other sideline trials that are also continuing for specific figures related to the case, right?
Indeed. So Yoon alone, I believe he has more than 10 separate trials that will be going on.
You mean 10 different charges?
Yeah,
or
10 different charges. And I think it's about 6 different trials that he has to stand for.
Because some are merged.
Exactly. But the biggest one, I think, is where he will face the most scrutiny for, which was ringleader for an insurrection, which he's charged for.
I see.
And that ruling is expected sometime in mid-January. If the schedule holds, maybe February. But we still need to wait and see what the courts decide.
And you've been following this very closely. Like, aside from Yoon, there are other figures related to the martial law or incidents before, like leading up to the martial law, that are under scrutiny. Simply put, whose fate looks most messed up?
Well, the former defense minister Kim Yong-hyun, he definitely has quite a lot on his judicial plate, something that his lawyers have been very, very vocal about trying to defend him in those separate courts, along with the former defense minister, former counterintelligence commander Yeo In-hyung, who's also been very much involved since the start of martial law planning. We just saw a ruling for the former intelligence commander Do Sang-won, who was a civilian at the time.
Loteria guy.
Yeah, the Loteria guy who was a civilian at the time of the martial law planning. But it turns out that he did influence a lot of the appointments within the military for martial law.
While being a shaman, right?
Exactly, yeah.
He received a 2-year sentence, if I'm not mistaken.
He received a 2-year sentence, but again, there are ongoing trials as well. So it's still determined on what the final ruling for him will be.
Everybody that you mentioned so far, of course, there are people like Han Duck-soo, former prime minister, or Choi Sang-mok, former finance minister, and then prime minister, and then president, like ad hoc. There are other people like that, but the people that you specifically mentioned are all military related or defense related. What does this say about, what broke basically in civil military trust looking at this incident?
Well, civil military trust was broken from what we could see from October 2020.
Wasn't strong either before that
No.
either. But
I think that Yoon was trying to use the military for his own political gain from what we can see from the findings. And especially regarding some of his loyalists within the military, albeit there were few, they were still in very influential positions, and they were put into those influential positions by the former defense minister and by Yoon himself. So it means that the sort of the liability of political neutrality within the military was something that was not working, and the military will have to work with the current administration to make sure that political neutrality is reformed.
And like informal authority. And John, what do you think, like, why does this matter beyond the courtroom if you look back at the entire incident and the investigation result?
Well, the thing that Joon Ha mentioned in his analysis, and the thing that really struck to me, was the fact that former President Yoon, deliberately moved the presidential office from the Blue House to the Defense Ministry building. And by doing so,
Allegedly, right?
Now, when the president moved the presidential office from the Blue House to Yongsan, he said that he wanted to make it a much more accessible presidential office, closer to the public, or whatever the reason that he publicly gave was. But the fact that he moved the office to the Yongsan Defense Ministry building, it just made it so much easier for the presidents to meet with senior brass officials.
Much more closer proximity.
Much more closely. And so, was this the intention from the beginning? We don't know, but I cannot help but think, was this something that he had planned from the beginning?
Mm-hmm.
And we should remember that the person who led the move from the Blue House to the Defense Ministry building was later a key man of martial law, Kim Yong-hyun, defense minister. At the time,
Correct.
he was the head of Presidential Security Service. We're not alluding that they would have been planning this since the inauguration, but it definitely would have made things very, very convenient for them once they had their mind on it. And the next topic this week, this was the biggest headline in the past few days, Pax Silica.
Yeah, Pax Silica. Where do we even start with this? So,
what is it? Start there.
It's a US-led initiative. Now, whenever we think of the current Trump administration, we don't really tend to focus on multilateral efforts. We tend to think of bilateral, tariffs and everything. But for this one was unusual because it not only was it US-led, it also included countries like South Korea, Japan, Australia, Singapore, Israel. And what this is, from my understanding of it, is that, for one thing, it's still just a declaration. They just had their inaugural meeting. But this seems to be like the U.S. trying to operate a sort of cartel that's a little similar to OPEC, but they're focused on semiconductors, AI, and of course, most importantly, the rare earth minerals that are required for these sectors to function. But the real question that I have about this Pax Silica initiative is why the U.S. launched this. And that's because, sure, I get the rationale. China has shown that it can very easily weaponize the rare earth minerals supply chain. And so, yes, while the rationale is there, we have to keep in mind that we already have the Mineral Security Partnership, which South Korea has been chairing since July 2024. What does the Pax Silica do that the MSP is not doing already? So that's the big question that I've got, this redundancy. And of course, if we actually look at the meeting that took place in the U.S., this was led by the U.S. State Department. We did not see Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. We did not see the United States Treasury Representative Jameson Greer. Is the State Department trying to make itself relevant by having this sort of grand initiative? Does it have blessings from his counterparts at the White House or the other departments? I'm not quite sure. There's a lot of questions regarding Pax Silica at the moment.
You mentioned that there are potential overlap with the existing framework, but that happens all the time, doesn't it? Like someone creating a new platform and then part of it already exists from the previous administration or even within that term.
Sure, it happens, but that doesn't make it any less questionable.
Right.
We have to think about goals.
So what's different is what I'm asking.
What the Trump administration really focused on with the Pax Silica initiative that I'm quite sure is different from the MSP is that Pax Silica really focuses on what they called quote-unquote energy grids. The document itself said that they're going to be investing, I believe, $20 to $30 billion in trying to find energy sources. And so one of the key countries that was part of the observers in that Pax Silica initiative was the UAE, of course, an energy powerhouse. And so this seems to be the direction that the United States is trying to go with. They seem to be saying we need a lot of energy, so we need countries like the UAE, but we also need nuclear energy. And so a lot of this initiative seems to be slightly different from the MSP's current agenda and what they're focused on. But again, besides those little tidbits, I'm not quite sure how different this really is.
Any particular reaction or response from South Korean side?
I believe that the South Korean government is absolutely gung-ho about this. They dived headfirst all the way into this new Pax Silica. Just like how Unity dived headfirst into IPEF, but that's a different story. So yeah, absolutely, South Korea is excited about this. But are other countries excited about this? Because we have to remember that Canada was one of the observer nations, but it did not sign on to this Pax Silica initiative, and neither did the Netherlands. And so countries are not quite sure as to what to really expect. I think South Korea is thinking it's best to just dive head in and be at the table when the negotiations start. But other countries seem to be taking a bit more of a cautious approach.
So speaking of U.S.-led economic initiatives, so the Korea Zinc deal, it says that Korea Zinc will invest $7.5 billion to construct an integrated smelter in Tennessee. So what's this actually meaning?
So yeah, Korea Zinc just said that they're going to invest a lot of money to build a smelter in Tennessee, and they believe that they will be fully operational by 2029. So this is a massive project. This is part of South Korea's attempt to integrate more fully into U.S. supply chains. But, we've talked about that a lot of times. What I really want to focus on is what Howard Lutnick said about the deal. Now, Howard Lutnick was really happy about this deal, and that's because it wasn't just about forest metals like zinc or copper. This supposedly will also be helping to smelt things like gallium, germanium, things that are important for semiconductors, and which are, of course, vital for the AI industry. But what really caught my attention was what Howard Lutnick said, and he said, quote, that this deal gives the U.S. preferred access to a portion of Korea Zinc's expanded production in South Korea.
What does that mean?
Well, what that means is that, when it comes to preferred access, it doesn't mean that the United States can come in whenever and say, hey, you've got all of these metals that we need, we're going to take them right now. That's not how it works. Preferred access means that should the U.S. national security concerns change, like, for example, if there was any part of East Asia that was to come into conflict, that the United States would get involved or somehow find itself blockaded, then the United States can say to Korea Zinc, hey, we've got this preferred deal, we need these metals, give them to us now. And so that puts Korea Zinc and South Korea in a very awkward position. Because, South Korean industries also need access to these metals. Would Korea Zinc say, all right, the U.S. has preferred access, so we're going to be providing these metals to the U.S. First, before we provide them to the South Korean government or to Samsung or SK Hynix? Because we have to keep in mind that if the United States is involved in any sort of military conflict in East Asia, it's going to be very hard for South Korea to not be involved in it in one form or another.
And overall, then, it sort of sounds like South Korean companies are becoming something like a strategic asset for the U.S. But it's also sort of like they are voluntarily becoming the tools or components that's aligned with the U.S. economic national interest. And it's also actually aligned with what we see as directions and how the U.S. sees things in the national security strategy as well.
I've said this repeatedly, and I'll say it again. As these tariff deals, as these investment deals continue to happen, a lot of South Korean industries are essentially turning into American subsidiaries.
Any other economic developments that we should flag?
Domestically, yes, there are a few indexes that are coming out, not just in South Korea, but US, EU, Japan, China. There are a lot of numbers that are coming out. And South Korea just posted record ICT exports, but the composition, the details matter a bit more than the actual headlines, it seems. What the data says is that in November, last month, the tech exports hit an all-time high, and it was overwhelmingly driven by semiconductors, especially memory. And the shipments, it rose a lot, 40% year on year. This is pretty big.
It's massive.
It's massive, and it's pushing chip exports to about $17 billion. Am I right?
Yes.
And the exports to China also surged more than 25%, which is outpacing the growth to the U.S. So it does look like it's rebounding, but is it a rebound, Sean?
It is rebounding for those particular sectors. Now, the important key phrase here is the K-shaped economy. What the K economy really means is that there are diverging paths between two different sectors. And in this case, the corporate sectors, those especially involved in semiconductors and AI, the large conglomerates, they're doing really well. If we look at their operating profit margins, for example, in the third quarter, they are hitting really high numbers, like 12%, 6%, depending on the companies and the sectors. But if we are looking at the SMEs, the small businesses, their numbers are still in the positive range, but falling because in the second quarter, their operating profits were around 6.6%, but in the third quarter, it went down to 4%. So in just 3 months, their profit numbers just fell.
So you mentioned SME, but when it comes to these main conglomerates that are driving the numbers, even with them, it's all mainly memory, specific memory.
Yep.
And just system semiconductors, right?
And that is an extremely volatile market.
Also volatile depending on the external factors as well, right?
Exactly. And we have to think about what's been going on in China. Now, when Donald Trump said just recently that he's going to allow NVIDIA to sell H200 memory chips to China, what that basically did was, I'm just going to say it. Donald Trump screwed over South Korea. And what happened?
What's new?
Screwed over hard.
Yeah.
And that's because back in August, the United States revoked the VEU waivers for South Korean companies. Now, VEU stands for the Verified End User Waivers. This was from the Biden administration. Now, what the VEU waivers allowed for South Korean companies in China to do was to still get the licenses to import U.S. equipment into their Chinese facilities in order to build high-end memory chips.
As long as they are U.S. stuff going in there,
yes.
Right?
But in August, that VEU waiver was revoked. Now, what that means is that SK Hynix and Samsung need to get individual permit licenses for everything that they want to import from the United States. And so good luck with that. And so that's why the South Korean companies, yes, their export numbers to China has risen, but a lot of that is because of memory chips and DRAM chips. Whereas the United States, like companies like NVIDIA or Micron, and they're coming in and say, hey, we don't have to compete with the Koreans anymore. We can just come into the Chinese market and sell as much as we want. Of course, that really depends on how much the Chinese are willing to buy. But basically, what the Americans did was they cut South Koreans' legs off right from underneath them.
Then what happens at these China fabs when it's basically illegal to do anything about it?
Well, it's not illegal, but they just cannot get the parts. So what's going to...
More like legally difficult.
Yes, exactly. Legally difficult to get the components and the parts that they need from their U.S. counterparts. But what's going to happen is that China needs all of these memory chips right now. And so they are happy to import them from South Korean companies. But because these are technologies that are easily replicable, and we have to look at how much state subsidies that these Chinese companies get, it's only a matter of time before this market gets squeezed out by the Chinese competitors. So we don't really know how long South Korean companies will be able to profit from this market.
I just recently read that the U.S. employment numbers have been lowest in 4 years. Will something like this impact anything that we just mentioned?
I don't really actually know what the U.S. labor numbers are, and that's because the U.S. labor numbers, they've been fudged a little bit. Either they've not been reported because of the shutdown, or there are some economists saying that the numbers are, the unemployment numbers are higher than they actually are. And so there's a lot of debate going on about
with the
U.S.
numbers
employment
itself.
numbers.
I see.
Yeah. So we are not actually quite sure.
Then let's put a pin on that.
Looking to stay informed about South Korea's fast-evolving political, business and cultural landscape? Join us on Korea Pro, the go-to resource for in-depth analysis expertly curated by top-tier professionals. And now you can pick the membership level that best suits your needs, thanks to our new subscription packages. Starting at just $199 annually, you can access daily analysis and our weekly podcast. Or try our premium membership package, which offers additional perks such as executive briefings, monthly reports and forecasts, networking receptions and event opportunities, as well as much, much more. To find the best fit for you, just head to signup.koreapro.org and become a member today.
Week ahead, what's happening in South Korea next week domestically?
Right. Well, it'll be Christmas, but also there'll also be the no plastics rule starting from next week. So South Korea is going to ban the free provision of disposable plastic cups, and they'll require customers to pay for them, likely at least 100 to 200 won. Under a comprehensive deplastics policy set to be unveiled just next week by the Environment Ministry. So the large cafes will again face a phased ban on in-store use of disposable paper cups. Straws of all materials will be provided only upon request, and plastic cups will be added to producer recycling obligations. So this does follow on from what the Yoon administration originally proposed last year, but it looks like the Lee administration is catching on.
Anything with domestic politics or foreign policy going on
There
next
is
week?
insurrection tribunal legislation bill.
And Lee has been doing all these 업무보고,
ministry briefings.
Throughout the week. And the headline or controversy was that he was live streaming everything, like even like little tidbits that got quite controversial. Is this week the end for that?
Yes. So they'll finish with the foreign ministry and the unification ministry tomorrow. I believe they're doing the defense ministry just now as we're speaking. It has been a controversy since it's the first time that these ministry briefings on these meticulous policies have been live streamed. But of course, at the same time, on the other side of the pool, there's also people that are commending the president for being transparent about his policy briefings and making sure that the public knows what the government is actually doing.
It's just easier for us to transcribe if they do that. But there were some moments where it looked a bit risky to live stream certain discussions.
Lee was very explicit and candid with a couple of his ministers and also some working level staffers based on the details.
Incheon airport issue.
Exactly.
That was one of the main controversies.
There was an Incheon airport issue. I think it was checking baggage or something that went on, but it was a very public rift where he did publicly denounce the Incheon airport chief for not knowing his bits.
And we will probably stop seeing that since like next week. And are there any known public schedule for the president or the ministers?
Right now, nothing has been announced for the president. We're still waiting on his Christmas schedule.
Okay.
And all of this information will be sent to email inbox by Monday at 2 p.m. via the Week Ahead newsletter. So if you'd like to know more, please subscribe. Bye.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in.
If you want to know more, sign up for our daily executive briefings. We'll brief you on all you need to know from the past 24 hours and why it matters, delivered to your inbox every morning.
If you want to stay ahead of the curve, sign up for Korea Pro to get a full package of insights, from daily expert analysis to profiles, month in review, week ahead, and more.
And until next time, I'm Jeongmin Kim.
I'm Joon Ha.
And I'm John Lee, and we'll see you next time on the Korea Pro Podcast.